Hello, welcome everyone to a new conversation of the Altering, Shifting, Communing series, a project hosted by Call for Curators. I'm Ilaria Conti, the curator of the series, which began almost a year ago now to communally discuss the multiple understandings and possibilities of curating. And in this series of exchanges, conversations, we focus on practices that foster diverse forms of knowledge and exercise critical thinking by placing collaboration at the center of the work, and also by cultivating cross-cultural and normative approaches. Something that I always like to repeat is that through this series, we also look at curating as a system of power that can also spark change in the social, political, financial infrastructures that allow for contemporary art to exist. And so that ultimately through this series, we want to also address the responsibilities of curating and the importance of considering not only what we do, but how we do it. And in this direction, the title of the series, Altering, Shifting, Communing, is also a statement of intent, serves as a statement of intent toward altering the terms of the conversation, shifting ground, and communing with each other. Now, today, we welcome Mari. Hello, Spirito. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi.
For a conversation on her curatorial work and that of Protocinema. As always, we will be in conversation for approximately 40 minutes, and then we will open up to the Q&A. So for those who are watching, feel free to ask questions in the meantime as we speak, as we chat through the comment section of Facebook and YouTube. And here we go. Mari, thank you again for being here. And first and foremost, congratulations on Protocinema's 10th anniversary. This is a very important milestone. So I always start by asking our guest to introduce herself in her own words so as to not speak for others. And also something that I always ask, I've been always asking since the beginning of this series, which is very important to me, is also to ask you, yes, where are you, but also how are you, and how have this past months or this past year been for you and for Protocinema?
Thanks, Ilaria. This is so special and wonderful to be with you. And thanks again for the invitation, of course. And let's see. Yeah, my name is Mari Spirito, and I'm the executive director of Protocinema. And I'm in Istanbul, and I've been here for the past 15 months. And I'm well. I think that it's fortunate to be among the small group of people who are happy to be still and not flying and in solitude mostly, but not completely, of course.
Yes.
And, a very big contrast from my previous lifestyle, which was a lot of flying and, moving around and so forth. And, to be able to be literally physically grounded and then also emotionally grounded and having time to do a lot of reflection and respond to this world event.
Thank you for this. So then I would say, let's get to it. And as we said, Protocinema was born 10 years ago now as a project that somewhat functions, I would say, in between, no? Because you envisioned it as something operating across two different locales, New York and Istanbul. And so I would like to start by asking you if you could share also what was, in your opinion, the curatorial context of these two cities at the time in which Protocinema was born, because we know that there's been a lot of change across both places. And I guess it's interesting to see it or to learn about it through your eyes, through your experience.
Yeah, well, they're so different, and they continue to be completely different. So it's more like a yin-yang kind of relationship where, when I first started coming to Istanbul in 2007, and then started Protocinema in 2011, that was a time, where the world economy was shifting quite a bit. And, of course, with the crash of 2008 in the United States, and that, had a really huge effect on the world. But that was also a time when, Erdogan was growing and the situation was getting better in Turkey at that time. There was a lot of growth for civic services like hospitals and schools and roads and jobs, and the economy was growing in Turkey. So you had that kind of yin yang. There was a feeling, the illusion, let's say, in New York that our best days were behind us, and an illusion in Turkey that our best days were ahead of us. So, all these things that are constantly pushing and pulling against each other all the time anyway. And then art-wise, the art field, after working in galleries for 20 years, I saw a huge amount of growth in the late 90s and 2000s, where it was such an amazing, exciting time. Wow. I mean, a lot of fun and a huge amount of growth, and also a lot of the sector tipped into a more commercial frenzy, and where it used to be about placing artworks in collections to generate support for artists. Then it became like, insustainable. Like you just had to keep going and going at such a rate that it was really a frenzy. And then on the other side, in the art field in Istanbul, there was a very materially lean, but content-driven, rich group of artists that were working when I was coming here, like Hale Tanger and Ahmet Oud, Banu Genitolu, Emre Huner, to name just a few of so many, writers, curators, artists. And it was a very, dramatic contrast. So that was pretty interesting. And the third level, to answer this question properly, is like, personally for me, like I had a interesting life experience in my early 20s where one of my sisters was abducted into the Unification Church, which is the Moonies. It's a destructive mind control group. So that had a huge effect on me in my, early years and my whole family. And so then, of course, creating ways that people can have their own agency and their own voice and be empowered became a real priority for me. So when I was dealing with these issues in my work in the United States, there was kind of less awareness of these kinds of things. How it is, like it's more likely that Americans don't realize how media is affecting them, especially, before the 2016, let's say. But when I would discuss these issues in Turkey, people completely understood and had things to say. And so I felt that there was a big space for healing and growing in Turkey, which I know sounds unusual, but it's true.
Thank you for this. Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
Mary, we just had a quick glitch with the line.
As is life, glitches amok.
Totally, and the internet is the least reliable of all things in our present day life, I would say.
Yeah.
So then I wanted to
get back to the idea of the bridge thing, the context, like what was going on, like sort of the curatorial kind of a vision, that in the beginning I was using the word bridge a lot, like bridging two different cultures, and I was very excited, and I wanted to be like a portal or like some kind of connecting device and so forth. But then what happens over time is it became more like more on a microbe level of the things that when plants are decomposing and they create this, I can't figure out the word for this, this filmy substance that then helps the decomposition of the bigger living things that are changing form. And then that stuff also becomes the earth that the other things are grown in. So I think that it's about being these little tiny microbes in all these different places.
Yes, you're a nutrient somewhat for. Well, now we get to chat more about this, because I really want to get to the core of Protocinema, asking you if you could chat more, perhaps, or even from more of a curatorial perspective, how and why you decided to create it, but also in response to which urgencies. You've addressed this already somewhat. And then why did you decide, as you say, back then, to call it a bridge, but still to opt for this in-betweenness, yes, between geographical context, but also between social context, and so doing this work of being back and forth, and always, I guess it requires more work, but also a bigger energy, and sort of it's a lot more, than being in just one place. So I wanted to ask you if you could tell us more, and also how did you start? Like literally, how did you get it started?
Oh, right. So I think the urgencies that I would say respond to this is about a need for plurality, where of course I respect all the work of other gallerists and museum colleagues and people in institutions like Kunsthalles and so forth. These are all super valuable and important, and for me it was always a both and conversation about adding on and expanding and creating other options, not only for myself, but for artists and writers and other curators and so forth. So it was about how do I take the resources and the knowledge and the relationships that I had and expand it and put it to additional uses. So we're not negating anybody, we're just making the party bigger, ideally. So if we think about plurality, then of course that means you want to include other voices, and maybe some of those voices aren't the voices that are in the main canon or what we call the centers, either economic or political centers and so forth, and have exchange that can, open up understanding. And that maybe from understanding comes empathy. And then from empathy, we generate lots of other things that are super important in our society. So there was an urgency for plurality that I felt like maybe that was just reflecting my life, that I hadn't seen so many of different voices, and I wanted that for myself. So I also wanted it for others too. I don't know. I mean, there's even a thing that if you really want other people to have their voices, my agenda is for you to have your agenda.
Yes. To be able to articulate multiple things at the same time and not just have to choose one direction and just leave it there. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also the thing about the conversation and the betweenness, where it's not about me and it's not about you. It's about this kind of discourse that happens between us. And the misunderstanding, of course, is our favorite cousin, the third culture that, generates all this, hopeful different kinds of understanding. And so maybe that being in between we're in that place where all that kind of stuff can happen. And of course, art is a great place to have misunderstandings, because that's kind of the main goal, right? Understand, misunderstand, understand again. These layers keeps shifting and slipping depending who's looking at a work of art, how we understand it, how we read it. Is there a right or wrong? How much am I bringing to myself of it? How much not enough? So I think the cross-cultural aspect is a super high priority for me.
I see. And so then really, we will talk in a moment about the projects, because I really would love to hear from you directly about.
Oh, but you said, how did it start? How did I actually start?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was already traveling back and forth between Istanbul and New York for 3 or 4 times a year for 4 years. This wasn't a whim. This was a lot of back and forth. And I was also involved with Su Platformu, which is a water activist group here in Istanbul, and traveling around Turkey and talking about why people should care if their water is privatized and commercialized, whilst, making exhibitions with artists and putting artists from Turkey in group shows at 303 Gallery, where I was working at the time, and then bringing artists, to Istanbul and doing things. So then it was sort of, Protocinema started as an outgrowth of what I was already organically doing. And then even having friends who are support structures, people in my life that I love, that were saying hey, why don't we just be your board members? We'll sign the papers to get the 501c3 tax status in the United States. And then as you grow, you can replace us with proper board members. So it was November Painter, who was at SALT at the time, who's now in Toronto, Kate Fowle, who was doing great things at ICI and is now at PS1, and Renaud Proch, who's now the executive director of ICI, Independent Curators International, and Mike Nelson, the artist. So really it started just by an outgrowth of something I was already doing. So, and support of friends. And then slowly it got to be, more formalized. So.
Yes. And so then I wanted to talk also about the infrastructure for a moment, since you've touched upon it now. And it seems so important to me always, but especially when talking about Protocinema, because then it's really part of the project no, at large, I would say. And as I was telling you also, as we were preparing for this talk, what I've been always kind of thinking and believing is that the infrastructure is very important, is very central in determining the possibilities of curatorial contents, no, of a project, and that the infrastructure in and of itself is a curatorial choice in a way, that the content is the infrastructure and vice versa, and the two cannot be separated. The infrastructure you set up will inevitably determine what kind of content you could possibly produce or develop. So I was very interested in, when reading Protocinema's description, in the fact that you state that it is an organization free of brick and mortar, so that it does not carry this weight of a permanent infrastructure or a permanent space and so on. And I find it very interesting, of course, also because it's a direction that many organizations have embraced in the past year because of the pandemic and so on. But this is something that you decided to choose as a very intentional direction right from the beginning, right from the onset 10 years ago. So again, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about what your thinking was and what your curatorial process was behind that decision. And why did you take it? How did you see it unfold? And why you decided to keep it that way also through time, as Protocinema grew?
Yeah, right, because that could change, right? Yeah. So, okay, where to begin? So even when I was at the gallery, I was drawn towards working on long-term, large-scale projects with the artists. Like, for example, Doug Aiken, we did this project called Station to Station, which was a performance on a train that went across the United States, and another one called Black Mirror, which was on a boat in the Aegean Sea. So there was already this kind of experience. And also some of the stuff that I saw that I loved was, what Art Angel in London was doing, and James Lingwood has, joined our advisory committee, and so this was kind of happening already. Like, I was doing these, instead of getting excited about hanging a painting on a wall and placing it in a collection, I was spending more time doing these longer term projects, which also, entailed a lot of fundraising. People think that galleries just have these like enormous wallets, and not all of them, most of them don't. So I would have to go out there and fundraise. And there was even a project that we worked for a long time to fundraise for Doug to make a sculpture at Rockefeller Center that would be a cloud. Of course, that never happened, but it was pretty cool we talked to over 90 different people about trying to get money and funding for it. And it was, I learned a lot in that process. It was really exciting. So that already was sort of like evolving. And then being someone who was already going back and forth, that was already in place. And don't forget, like at those early days in New York, there was lots of empty storefronts, like as I imagine there is now. So it felt like, if there's an empty storefront, we can activate it and it would make sense, and things like that. So there's that. And then also a lot of the artists that I knew in the United States and Europe, they all wanted to come to Turkey. It was like super exciting. It was like, something that was really curious. And a lot of the artists in Turkey wanted to go to other places. So it was also about, like, if you're really artist centered and you really follow the artist and follow the artwork, you can create an opportunity for an artist that maybe they might not have, like fulfilling something that's different. And also that the space itself, the choice of not having a space. Yes, one, it was financially driven. Of course, I didn't have the money to have a building and like infrastructure and all this kind of stuff, but also the excitement of talking to an artist and saying, what do you want to do? And they say, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, cool, what city in the world do you want to do it in? We go through a list and, talk about different who we know and what we'd like to do and how we imagine it, where we've been, where we haven't been, and all this stuff. So this was like just super exciting, because also then the context becomes even more part of the artwork when you're always introducing a new artist to a new context. Because part of the intention too is that we're not gonna redo the work of our colleagues. We want to expand again on the work. So I'm not gonna, if an artist has already had a museum show somewhere or a big, gallery presence, we're not gonna then take an artist there. We're gonna take someone that hasn't been there. So it's about generating this adding on thing. And then it just kept coming. It just kept growing. And even now, like you hear people talk about how the new brick and mortar is the website. People don't go to your website unless they want to see if you're real or not. They follow you on social media and then they go to your website and they don't even care if you have a physical space or not. So that's changed a lot. And yeah, I think it just became one of those things that it kept generating more and more. Like it became, people started to know that was happening. They would come to me with those kind of projects. And also, when you're really following the artists and supporting them and being like, well, how do we hold this up? The artworks is in this great period of another generation of dematerialization as well, with sound art, instruction art, text and books as art, digital art, like all these different things. So if artwork itself is getting dematerialized, it totally makes sense that art organizations and support structures for artists are going to get dematerialized as well. So yeah. And then the kind of interesting that happened is, so since I don't have a staff everywhere all the time, because I'm not everywhere all the time. I'm sometimes here, sometimes there. So I would always be looking for people who are available to work part-time or, for a month or two and kind of build this, Ocean's 11 kind of team and then disperse, and they might have other jobs and stuff. So what happened was I started to get to know a lot of the young people in the art community here in Istanbul, and some of them didn't even know each other, even though we're working at galleries or magazines or whatever, and they all wanted to make shows. So then there was a great situation where there's a nonprofit space here called 5533, and they said, Mary, they're artists, Volkan Aslan and Nancy Altagan, and they like to make shows there, but they don't want to run it, So they're like, we'll give it to you, you can run it for a year, and they would give it to different curators, like Ozge Ersoy did it for a year, like this is going on. And so I said, I'm only going to use it once for one of my shows, and I'm not going to take it over. That just seems mean. Let's share this with other people. So then we started the Emerging Curator series.
It's just wonderful.
Kind of organically. Now we're doing the Emerging Curator series in different places as well. So
yes. Wonderful. So then let's chat more about the projects. Like I want to also get to the content and how you're working on that. So I wanted to ask you whether you could guide us through some of the projects that somewhat have been pivotal to Protocinema's arc of activity. We've been talking about this arc also as prepping for this talk. And if you can also tell us more how this sort of flexible format, this multi-site format, this cross-cultural curatorial approach has then really been structuring or giving life, breathing life into the programming. How does it reflect in practical terms through specific projects when thinking about what you've been doing, what Protocinema has been doing so far? So I don't know if you want to guide us through some of them, and I know you have some images, so I'm happy to show it if you want.
Of the shows that are happening right now, but I would love to just tell you about a couple of shows that were really special. One was done in 2015 in New York with Hale Tanger, who is from here. And there was something really special. She's a sort of leader in the art field here, and she's about my age, and she's been making work for a very long time, and is a real supporter of other artists as well. And in 1995, in the Istanbul Biennial that Renee Block curated, she made an artwork that I thought was really special, and it articulated a lot of the misconceptions that I felt in the West were about Turkey, where people always say like, oh, it's a meeting of the East and the West, and it's this great intersection of worlds, and it was through a great amount of history, but in recent history, it actually has been like a liminal, suspended in-between place. And so Hale's work was called "We Don't Go Outside, We Were Always on the Outside. We Didn't Go Inside, We Were Always on the Inside." And I felt like this articulated it really well. But this was a work that existed for the 1995 Istanbul Biennial. And at that time, when the Biennial was over, it just got broken down. She saved some of the bits, and the parts were thrown away or whatever. It wasn't like a museum's going to buy something like which wasn't that time in the mid-90s then. So I always wanted to see this. And so I approached her and I said, would you be open to recreating it so I can see it and experience it? And could we do it in New York? And so fortunately she said yes. And so that was kind of incredible to take a piece of history that was over 20 years old and bring it to Manhattan. And luckily, she did save a lot of the essential aspects of it. And we searched and discussed a lot the right kind of space. And there's a building in the West Village called Westbeth Building, and it was originally built as Bell Laboratories in the mid-1800s. And Bell Laboratories is very interesting because it was the center of communication technology at the time and for a long time. And it's a place where the first transatlantic telephone call was made. It's the first place where audio was put to film. So to have a work that's actually about lack of communication and being suspended and held in a place that was, doing so much amazing work about communication seemed like a really great fit. And weirdly, because of Hurricane Sandy, they had this huge basement, and the building's massive. It's literally a block by a block by a block. It's like a planet. The basement had really high ceilings, but it was flooded because of Hurricane Sandy. And so it looked like this raw industrial building, which was actually quite similar to the Entrepot building where Halle first installed this artwork. And yet it was completely enclosed. It was in a basement. So you had to go in the entrance of the building and then go down these stairs, and you were in this dark sort of industrial space. And her work is made up of a single wooden guardhouse. And this guardhouse that she found was on the inside of the guardhouse. The guard that was guarding this warehouse had hung pictures from magazines and calendars all over the inside, even the windows. You couldn't see out at all, of beautiful idyllic landscapes, and made like a beautiful interior world, which, when you're in Istanbul, it is a beautiful place. I mean, outside of the problems with human rights and so forth. But in order to get to the inside of this guardhouse, you had to first go inside of a yard that was contained by barbed wire. And so it was almost like a prison yard or some like very intense kind of space, very strong barbed wire. And there was an entry on the other side, so you had to walk all the way around it. And you could hear that there was music playing on a little radio. And it was Turkish folk music at the time. And when she made the artwork in 1995, it was only 1 year after the government had opened up radio for commercial public use. From the beginning of the founding of the Turkish Republic until 1994, the radio and newspapers were all completely controlled by the government. So if you wanted to get any information that wasn't, propaganda of the state, you had to talk to other people. That was the only way you could get real information. So her fascination with creating this world that you then had to go inside the barbed wire yard and then go inside the house and have this beautiful music, and then still it broke a lot of the misconceptions that a lot of my friends in New York had about what Turkey was.
I see. Well then, Mari, do you want to show some of the images that you had prepared, or because you mentioned 2 projects that you wanted to talk about?
How are we doing for time? And we're
doing great. We are doing.
So yes. Actually, because I had initially was going to show videos of these 2 works, I didn't have still images, but so I think what I'll do is discuss the sort of the other yin yang of this, which is that Halle Tanker show was in 2015. So in 2019, I had British artist Mike Nelson, who do a show in Istanbul. So this gives you like the 2 different sides. And of course, I told you earlier in this conversation that Mike was one of my earliest board members. And of course, at a certain point, he was like, I want to do a show with Protocinema. I said, that's fine. You have to get off the board. You have to wait a proper amount of time, and then you can. So we waited a long time, but it was fine because we've known each other a really long time. And he actually has an extremely long relationship with Istanbul and Turkey because he started coming here when he was 19 years old. And now he's in his early 50s, I think I'm permitted to say. And so he's been coming for over 30 years. And the interesting thing about Mike, and he's traveled all over Turkey, and he's been coming back and forth during the entire time. It wasn't like he came and then never again. So he has, and he was in the Dan Cameron's 2003 Biennial, Istanbul Biennial. He's been, here at shows. He has a long relationship with Turkey, which is really beautiful. And the thing that's interesting is in making this show, I didn't realize it, but in making this show, I realized that Mike's visual sensibility was very much formed by Turkey's visual sensibilities. And I think that was shown most in his Venice pavilion, the British Pavilion in Venice, where he recreated the Istanbul Biennial in the British Pavilion. Yes. Anyway, so what he did for Protocinema was he came over the years and he got into taxis and put his phone in his pocket and took videos of taxi drives around the old city in Sultan Ahmet and over to the Asian side. And what he was trying to capture at that time, that was like maybe 16, 17, 18, was this sensation that, Turkish citizens and visitors get when you get in a taxi that you're not really sure if the driver's taking you where you asked to go or not. And this is just a thing that happens. And so he's like, how can I capture this? And how can it maybe be a metaphor for some bigger things that are happening here? And so we had these videos and we were looking around for a place to do the show. And since he did an exhibition in an old Han in Sultan Ahmet, like a old Byzantine Han in 2003, he thought this should be somehow having a dialogue with that, because his work has a lot to do with the slippage of the past and the present. So we found not far from that in Sultan Ahmet, a 1950s Han. So it's sort of like the modern shopping mall. And it was a place before the internet where, people would come from all over the country and sell their goods. And it's literally like a city inside of a building, like there's a whole subculture and so forth. But now at that time in 2018, 19, there was a suspension, like a real slowdown of economic growth here. So lots of things were closed and empty, and in the secular Turkey that we knew that was growing had stopped growing. And so it was more about this about this end of an era, let's say. And so in that, on the entire 7th floor across like 22 rooms, there were like glass rooms with like old offices and stacks of goods. We interdispersed videos, but on old monitors or projected, kind of reflecting off a mirror. And there were lots of different objects that he had found. So you had this sensation that you were also time traveling back to the 50s. And you had these videos that were carrying you somewhere we didn't know where we were going. So having these two different sides of like, what it's like to show someone here from outside and what it's like to show someone, in New York who's not from these are the kind of the curatorial ambitions, and this is how it works. Yeah.
The relations that you're weaving across these places and these ideas, these practices. Oh, this is very interesting. And yes, I'm sorry we couldn't show properly the video, but I guess we can show briefly the image if you want. And so then talking a little bit about these seminal projects, I also wanted to jump to your most recent project, which I think is very interesting and it's worth discussing in depth, which is A Few in Many Places. I found it to be a very interesting format because it really celebrates this multi-site collaborative approach that Protocinema has been cultivating, that you have been cultivating. And so I would love to hear more on that directly from you, and also learn a little bit more about at least some of the collaborators that you've been involving and sort of what kind of collaboration process you and Abidjan developed with this network of practitioners, because it's really massive work, but also a work of care that needs to be developed on a small scale. And then it becomes big because of the network, the little fragments that become a bigger picture. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk to us just also, of course, about the contents and where and with who, but also about the inner processes, sort of the more intimate and personal aspects or so of setting in motion this kind of process and this kind of collaboration, I know.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So from the top, let's see. So yeah, Abidjan Toto is this brilliant curator who's also like a writer and an activist, and he co-founded Forest Curriculum in Bangkok, and has lots of different areas of interest: economy, ecology, specifically the Zomia region, which is Southeast Asia up to India. And so we met and we instantly decided we were going to work together and do all these crazy things. And we were actually planning something else that involved getting together small initiatives and individuals working in the field so we could have strength in numbers, but still maintain our autonomy. And so then, of course, with the 2020 events, that thing became A Few in Many Places. And the ambition of A Few in Many Places is to maintain a foot in real life, to, instead of crying about what we can't do, to embrace what we can do. So create this balance, again, kind of yin yang thing, where we can do small interventions in places that are open in and out of crisis, like, you know, the corner store or essential businesses and so forth, with artists that are already here in the neighborhood. And we can walk and see them in small groups, like 2 or 3 people at a time. And it still matters. And we wanted to keep exercising that muscle of what it means to do something in the physical and activate the communities and our friends and so forth. And then also utilize the great might of the internet and interconnect them digitally. And how can we do this? And so, so we created Protozine, which is commissioned texts that link the exhibitions together. And I was really lucky to work with Abidjan Toto on bringing together different people in different communities. So we decided that the things we kept hearing were that people were very interested in how to break cycles of violence. Mm-hmm. Do we even have the capacity as human beings to do that? And if so, how? And the how lots of times turned out to be working collaboratively. So this kind of made sense because collaboration was one of our interests. And definitely when you work with different people in different parts of the world, they collaborate really differently. And so it's a lot about letting go of the ego and like, this is the way we always do it. And like, nope, we're going to do it like this. We're just going to go with the flow. So a lot of things became this go with the flow. But let me get into this. So why don't we actually? Yes. I can go like city by city and bring up the. I can talk about.
Okay. I'm gonna show the images.
Great.
Maybe. Let's see. Can you see it?
Yes. So yeah. So the signage that we had, A Few in Many Places, was introduced to us by Abidjan. They're young designers in just outside of Jakarta, called RAR. And so they made this image, which is made up from different spices and plants from all the different cities where we have exhibitions. And then there's the flight lines, which we're not flying, but again, these I thought made an interesting web of connections. So these flags are at all of our exhibitions. In New York, we were very excited to have a house on Governor's Island, which is part of the Governor's Island Trust Foundation. And there, that's where Lila Nezamian was like spearheading, really holding down the fort in New York. And she is a graduate of NYU, the Near East Studies program. And as fate would have it, this summer, 3 members of the Arab Image Foundation were doing a workshop. So let's see, Vartan Avakian, the artist, Christine Corey, curator and writer, and Yasmin Sabah, and also artist, photographer. And they're doing workshop about different archives from the Arab Image Foundation and what it means when people are forced to migrate, or even if they're not forced, and they have to leave the archives in the hands of others. How do you protect them from maintaining the intention and integrity of the original people to collect them? So there's a workshop, and a lot of the outcome of the workshop is going to be shown in this house on Governor's Island. And what we see here is one of Vartan's photographs, which is at the exhibition now. And that's actually a photograph of the dust of photos and film, like as it's breaking down. So like the physical breaking down of the material, which of course represents physical breaking down of lots of other things. And that's the longest running exhibition within the whole exhibition that goes until August 8th. So go to Governor's Island if you're in New York. These are images from Santurce in Puerto Rico, where Jorge Gonzalez has been also creating a ruckus. We were super lucky to partner with Embajada, the gallery, which also is, serves many other, it's a pillar in the community there. And so in the realm of breaking cycles of violence and working collectively, Jorge brought together a group of musicians, a band, if you wish, that was made specifically for this project of, priests, craftsmen, different kinds of musicians, and they're all chanting the rosary. And so the rosary has a very interesting history because the beads are actually originated from seeds, and praying to, Mary or the Christian level, and then you dig it down underneath, it goes back to indigenous religions, and then also completely down to, worshiping Mother Nature and Earth itself. So there is a project that Jorge Gonzalez has called Oficios de Escuelas, in which he always is bringing in lots of different collaborators, and it's all about maintaining knowledge that follows a lineage of indigeneity and keeping those lines alive. And he's an incredibly active and dynamic artist. And so there's more stuff coming from Puerto Rico, and this is what's going on right now. In Istanbul, we just opened a week ago our show in a beautiful house called, it's Curating Literature House, which was founded by journalists and writers. And it's a really special building, and where there's like a beehive of lots of different thinking and ideas going on. And journalists, of course, in Turkey have a very special place because they're really put at high risk for writing about what's going on. So it's a very special, safe place. And here, again, talking about working collectively and breaking cycles of violence. This is, I think, one of the more personal levels of this. Zeynep Kayan is an artist who works between Amsterdam and Ankara, and she's interested in repetition and how repetition shifts your mind and your perception, and somatic knowledge that's in the physical body that gets carried intergenerationally. And, how do we actually shift our way of thinking? If I want my society and my communities and my governments to change, can I actually implement a change in myself? So she's a very thoughtful, deep artist, and this work's beautiful. There's one image projected, but there's also another one that's on this old monitor here. And also it's stuff that we carry, in our body for generations and generations. So like when trauma is inflicted on, groups of people, it's not only them that feel it. This, as we know, goes on for generations. And then thinking about bigger cycles, this second image on top is an installation that's part of a larger project called ARC, in which Dennis Tortun and Catherine Hamilton have been working with VR. And initially, it was a VR project that then became a 2-channel film, then became a single-channel film, and here it's presented as a camera obscura in the actual room. And so here they're talking about the effect of the original camera obscura when, and there's a lot of different stories of when camera obscura was actually invented. I mean, the earliest one I think goes back to 400 AD in China. Then also George Eastman, there's people in Italy and, Vienna. But when we first understood that the vision was something outside of ourselves, the subject-object relationship changed. So then, of course, our relationship to our environment shifted. And now this work has a VR headset in it, and also one single orange tree, some broken eggs. And so there's living non-human figures in it, and a game that's running in the VR headset. And so this one addresses the simulation theory, and that how far we've come with the invention of the camera obscura, how much further are we going to go in the future from being separated from our environment with the now the advent of VR. So there's a lot there about thinking back and thinking forward and how we generate these cycles of behavior. Guatemala City. In Guatemala City, we were super lucky to work with Esvin Algeron Lam, who is an artist, but he also has a residency program in a hotel, and they did their exhibition on top of the hotel. So when you're in the exhibition, you're literally on top of, you're in the skyline of the city. It's really kind of incredible. So he is of Chinese descent. And so there were, workers that were brought over from China to grow bamboo in Guatemala that, to basically to provide the United States with bamboo. And so his work is a lot about unpacking these kinds of relationships. And so the flag that you see on the left is a traditional Chinese welcome mat with the stripes of the American flag. And then Camilla Juarez is the youngest artist in this show. And she literally put a huge light on this stanchion and brought it around the city, which is a very dangerous place for women to walk at night. There is a lot of violence against women. And of course, she did this on May 5th, International Women's Day, and filmed it. And like people, it was basically like a take back the night work. And the sculpture of her light is on top of the roof as well. And then Antonio Puccia, he's a shaman who does a lot of weaving with traditional materials, mostly in the woods, but here he did it on top of the space. So he's actually weaving in what is our new natural environment. And he's an incredible artist. I encourage you all to check his work out too.
It's wonderful because I was lucky enough to visit his studio in Lake Atitlan a couple of years ago. And so I saw some of these textiles live. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Incredible. Is there anything you can add to this then, maybe?
No, I don't want to add anything. I think it's just wonderful. And it's great to see. Also, I was looking at some of the pictures of the events also on this rooftop and so on. And we were talking a little bit earlier on, no, about how it becomes really a context. Yes, it is an exhibition, but it's also about a lively context in which people can meet and come and discuss and see things. And I think that's of huge value. It's wonderful to see that. Should I move on to the next?
That'd be lovely. Thanks.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Okay, so I don't want to mispronounce. Du Apatalum is a really interesting artist who has been working with refugees from Vietnam in Thailand and for a long time. He's really dedicated. And the situation in Thailand is that these refugees are completely, unrecognized. They have no rights at all. And simultaneously, he has a camera that he got from his mom, and it's broken. And so it takes these photographs that are also sort of like, misshapen, but also very poetic and beautiful. So they're going to be showing these photographs. Most of them are printed on metal. And then also it's accompanied by videos and a sound piece. I think this is in a storefront that's also a studio in Chinatown and Bangkok. And we're hoping that, as this kind of goes on, that it's going to continue to be an art space. But, Thailand is also in a time of great upheaval. So, and the COVID situation has been delaying us a little bit, but it's coming. Yeah. And I think it's quite powerful and political and beautiful. Okay. In the final one is our colleagues in Seoul, and the collective is called Welcome to Agasawa, and it's a large group that's really working as a collective. And what they've done is they put QR codes in this shopping mall in Seoul, which is right outside of where there's a piece of the Berlin Wall. So I don't know, why the Berlin Wall is there, but it is. These artists are interested in the perceived evenness or like freedom of the internet, which now we all know, especially when you're close to China, that it's completely not free. There's lots of regulations and just as much as nations and blockages and so forth. So they've put a lot of different work on online, but the physical experience is you go to the shopping mall and you find different QR codes, and at different times of day and the different QR codes, you enter into different artworks that are online. So they are going to be doing a performance, a 3-day performance at an abandoned bar on top of the mall that's partially instruction-based. So people will be getting instructions they can choose to follow or not follow. But most of this exhibition, you can go any time of day that the mall is open, and you follow it around as if you're in a video game. So there's a kind of simultaneous, non-physical thing happening, and all the works are made new for this project.
And I don't know what, oh, there we go.
Et voilà.
And voila. Let me just
something
remove
else that sort of so something that came out was instead of having everything opening at the same time and all this energy focused on the opening and then afterwards let people come, like what we found is that since we're not allowed to go to openings so much, we have these kind of decentralized openings of decentralized shows. So the opening day, there's a little bit of hubbub, but then there's hubbub like the whole week into the whole show. So this is shifting a lot. But something that came up, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this, is that instead of having like these deadlines, like it's going to open now, we need to have this due now, is that things were just kept unfolding, and all these situations were so changing all the time, and we have people in completely different conditions. So we created these phases of deadlines where, okay, this can happen, then this can happen, then this can be, and it's going to change. So like, for example, on a Governor's Island, Vartan is going to come sometime in June. He's going to add another project that's equally dynamic and beautiful about recipes of this poison plant that, he found in the archives that they're collecting, that actually is a recipe that's in the Bible, but then also shared among Armenian families. And when you cook it, it actually gives you power, makes you strong. So there's all these things that are going to be happening. And so I brought that up because we were really excited about our zine, and we have 6 different texts coming out. And the first one by Collective Rewilding is out now. It's on our website. And then we added on the one by Eric Bordelot, and that's more about the economics. Collective Rewilding is about the curatorial responsibilities. And then we have Lara Rajkovic, who just published a book about institutions in a time of protests. And then also to kind of even deeper have these linking between the cities, we have conversations. So like Jorge and I will be doing a conversation in text about each of our exhibitions. And Abidjan, Toto, and Lila Namazian are doing a conversation about their projects and how they interlink and expand on each other's work. And then Miji from Seoul and Esvin are going to also do a text. So these are going to be rolling out over the course of the whole show. So it's sort of this, it's like the cycles of nature itself. Things just keep unfolding, and there's never like a straight, black and white beginning and end. It's just like continuing unfolding.
It's organic, as you were saying before, in the hopes for what protocinema can be, this nutrient, no?
Yeah.
Across different locales. I really like that. So then, Mari, our time is almost up now.
Oh, no.
We're almost wrapping up. But then I encourage everybody who's watching this to ask questions. If they have questions for Mari, they can just drop them in the chat, in the comment section. I have one last question for you, Mari. I'm just going to skip to my last question, and I really want to mention this because it's something that stayed with me after our conversation. So something that you mentioned while we were preparing for this is the importance of giving before taking back. You worded it this way. And so I think it's a very important way to close perhaps this kind of conversation, to go back to it and sort of just, if you could articulate your thoughts on this, or just tell us what it means to you, how it has informed your practice and Protocinema's practice as an organization as well. Like this notion of generosity in a way seemed very important to me.
Maybe generosity might even be being too generous. It's almost like this thing where when you talk in the field about best practices is not being a jerk. But let me expand on that. So at every single interaction, there's an equal exchange. Then it makes sense. But if there's in any interaction where someone's gaining more than the other person, or someone's not gaining and someone else is gaining, then it's not okay. So like on a city level, on a government level, on a personal level, on institution to institutional partnership with, with the artist, the curator, and the writer, everybody in. So I think I did perplex some of my friends and colleagues in Istanbul when I was coming for 4 years and just coming and watching and looking and thinking. And I saw lots of people come to Istanbul and say, like, tell me who the hot artists are. Tell me who the collectors are. I want to meet all the collectors. Tell me tell me who the up-and-coming curators. And I said, I don't really want to be that person. That looks really like horrible. And so I said, maybe what I can do is just be here and participate and give first and do things for the artists. And then, like, if I want things, then take later. Like, maybe there could be a giving first and then take. And of course, it takes a much longer time. But it felt really right. And this whole thing about how we do it is as important as what we do is also, like, a constant thing of it's embedded in every single decision. So is that a curatorial practice? Sure. Is that words for a living? Okay, sure. Could it be like good politics? Yes. But yeah, this is what I experienced. And if you ever forget and fall off, it just reminds you again anyway. So.
Thanks for this, Mary. Yeah, I think it's all of the above, all the things that you mentioned, but it's also the ethics of one's practice, like to understand that you're part of a network of relations and that you need to nurture one another and not just take and suck energy and resources and life out of other people or other projects or other contexts and so on and so forth. So I think that's very important, and also very important to just really be aware of the relations, the power relations. Now, where do you position yourself, as you were saying before, in relation to someone else? Are you taking and that's it? Are you able to give something back? Is there a balance, or is it instead completely lacking?
I mean,
balance?
It's shocking that, like, an organization as small as mine pays fees to artists and to, like, people and speakers and so forth, and then these bigger institutions expect you to do it because it's just going to be, like, great for your resume, like this kind of thing. I'm still shocked about that, but anyway.
I think we should be very vocal about this.
It feels right, do it, kind of thing.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for this, Mary. I'm very happy that we had the chance to hear from you, to hear you articulate how you're going about this project. And I also encourage everyone, I'm going to share again the website here because there's a lot of interesting information on a few in many places. So it's really something to continue to follow and to look forward in terms of other talks and projects also online that you will be developing in the coming weeks. So with this, I guess our time is up. I would like to wrap up. Thank you so very much again. And for those who are watching and might be shy to ask questions, I just also want to remind that this is the Call for Curators email. If they have any question for Mary after the fact and want to reach out or something, Call for Curator is always very happy. We are always very happy to be a little bit of a bridge in this sense. And with this, I just say goodbye. Thank you, Mary. Hopefully we'll continue to follow the amazing work that you do, and say goodbye to everybody who's watching, and we'll come back for another talk at the end of June, at the end of the month. So thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe. Bye.